Hi everyone, John Heath again here for MiltonRose Learning with another Let's Learn video. So we're here today, we're doing a beginner's guide to Othello. So what we're going to try and do today is look at some of the basics just to give you an initial grounding in the play. Then we'll look at some of the key context to unlock the high marks as always. And then we'll round off by looking at some of the key characters within this tragedy. Okay, so it's a fantastic play, so hopefully this should be really interesting for you and really help you prepare for your exams. So first off then, if we look at some of the basics. Okay, so first off then, in terms of genre, this is very much a tragedy blended together with psychological drama, and it's a piece of Jacobean theatre. Now in that sense, Shakespeare explores personal jealousy interweaved with political conflict between the Ottoman Empire and the Venetian Empire, which is kind of provides the overarching narrative. But within that, it's exploring themes of love, betrayal, race, because Othello is an African Moor, a North African kind of soldier in quite a racist era, and manipulation coming from a guy called Iago. We'll get to know him in a minute, and ultimately shows the tragic downfall or the hamartia of the noble hero. Okay. Now, in terms of the plot summary, then, just giving you a very kind of brief overview, just because it's a beginner's guide. It's basically revolves around a character called Othello, and he is a respected Moorish general. Now, the Moors were North Africans in this period, dark-skinned, and that's very important in this very kind of racist kind of era for the context. And he is a general in the Venetian army. He's very good at what he does, and he secretly marries a character called Desdemona, who's a noble woman. However, Iago, who is one of Othello's lieutenants, he's bitter over being passed over for a promotion. So he then embarks on a very cruel plot to destroy Othello by basically convincing him that he has been cuckolded or basically betrayed and by Desdemona, and that she is unfaithful to him, and that triggers off all of the tragic consequences. Then moving forward, following Iago's kind of lies, it kind of gets worse and worse and worse, and Othello ends up murdering Desdemona, but because he believed that she betrayed him. But then he realizes, too late as always, that she was innocent. Okay, so he becomes racked by the guilt on the back of that tragic kind of event, and Othello ends up taking his own life. Okay. Iago's treachery is exposed, but the damage is irreversible, and almost kind of in a Shakespearean kind of twist, there is no divine judgment. Quite interestingly for Iago, he kind of almost just gets away scot-free and just walks off stage, which is most unusual. And it's quite interesting for you to tease out in any essays why Shakespeare characterises Iago in that way and why he's allowed to walk off scot-free. Okay, now in terms of key context then, so obviously with the history it's really important to know key parts of the history and the social kind of context to get the high marks. Okay, so we've teased out a few here. So first off, we've got military and hierarchy. So this is set in a rigid patriarchal military world. So patriarchal, great word for your essays. It just means male dominated, and this era was very much male dominated. So Othello shows how status and honour shape our fate within a patriarchal society. Othello does command respect because he is a general in the army, so there's discipline there, but his ethnic outsider status kind of will always put him on the outside of Venetian society, and it makes his fall all the more tragic because he can't escape his ethnic identity in what is a very kind of racialized kind of era. Then leading on to the next piece of context, obviously race and otherness. So Othello, as we know, is an African man in white Venetian society. Okay, I can't overstate, that's really important. And he's labelled as the Moor. just known as almost like the North African. That's how they know him, almost foregrounding his ethnic identity. And Shakespeare explores, through the character of Othello, he explores how racism isolates the character and then makes him vulnerable to manipulation from Iago later, who plays on all of his kind of social and ethnic kind of weaknesses and vulnerabilities. Okay. Then the last piece of context is gender and misogyny. So misogyny obviously meaning kind of woman hating, and there's a lot of misogyny in the play, which Shakespeare probably is almost satirizing and critiquing within Jacobean society. So women in Othello, Desdemona, Emilia and Bianca principally, they all face kind of harsh suspicion, even if it's justified or not. They just receive that suspicion just by virtue of being women. So it's very much misogyny in practice. The play reveals how male control and patriarchal attitudes lead to female oppression and tragedy. So there is a heavily gendered, patriarchal, misogynistic component to this play. And that's, again, very interesting if you want to approach the play from a feminist interpretation. Okay, you'll get a lot of joy if you analyse it from that perspective. Okay, and then finally let's just round off by looking at the key characters within this tragedy. Okay, so first off then we have obviously Othello. So he is a noble and respected Moorish general within the Venetian army, and he secretly married Desdemona. So it's very revolutionary because Desdemona is a white character, so we have the notion of kind of an interracial marriage in the 1600s, which was revolutionary in this period. Very, very interesting to comment on. He represents the outsider in prejudiced society in this period, and the tragic vulnerability of an honourable man who could easily be manipulated. That's almost his tragic flaw. He's very gullible in that sense. He symbolises the fall of a tragic hero. He's destroyed by his own jealousy and his own insecurity. Iago plays him like a fiddle, metaphorically, and kind of manipulates him until his destruction. So a true tragic hero. Then moving on, we have Iago, and the emoji of the snake is well chosen. So Othello's kind of lieutenant, he's kind of understudy, and he schemes to ruin him after being passed over for a promotion. He's not happy with it, and he kind of tries to destroy Othello on the back of that. So he represents manipulation, deceit, and the danger of hidden malice when someone smiles to your face, but they're ready with a dagger behind their back, metaphorically. And Iago really typifies that. He symbolises evil without a clear motive. He kind of doesn't really have much of a motive apart from being passed over for promotion, which is not really enough, to be honest. And the destructive power of deceit. A really good technical term to describe Iago is the Machiavellian villain. Okay, he's the Machiavellian villain even in the play, and that will be a great phrase to use when you're describing him in your essays. Okay, moving on, we have Desdemona. So she is Othello's loyal and innocent wife. So she's wrongly accused of infidelity and having an affair, which leads to tragic consequences. She represents purity, honesty, and the vulnerability of women in this patriarchal era. You know, they struggle to survive in this era. And symbolises ultimately sacrificial love and the tragic consequences of passion. As Othello kind of loses his mind and kind of kills Desdemona, it's all for nothing ultimately. Then we have Emilia, so Iago's wife and Desdemona's maid, who ultimately exposes Iago's deceit. So a very important narrative function there. She represents female strength and moral awakening and the overlooked voice of truth in a play filled with liars, especially with Iago. Symbolises the tragedy of women silenced or dismissed in patriarchal systems, but the fact that she does expose Iago's deceit seems to be Shakespeare opening up space for women to actually have their view, because it's very important in this play. Okay, then we have Cassio, who is Othello's loyal lieutenant. He's demoted though after Iago orchestrates a drunken brawl. Nevertheless, he represents honour and integrity within the play and symbolises the collateral damage caused by envy and manipulation. A bit of a tragic character on, on a kind of mini scale compared to Othello. Then we have Roderigo. So he is a kind of foolish nobleman in love with Desdemona, but he is again manipulated by Iago. So he is a symbol of gullibility and how jealousy can lead to our own self-destruction. A little bit of a kind of mini version of Othello in that sense. Not quite as tragic, more foolish than anything else, but almost a bit of a kind of minor mirror to Othello. He funds Iago's schemes and acts as an unwitting kind of tool for Iago, and also shows the reach of Iago's manipulation, whose tentacles extend throughout the whole play, really. Okay, and then finally we have Bianca. So she's a courtesan in love with Cassio, and she's often dismissed and mocked, probably kind of unfairly, to be honest. She represents class and gender prejudice. Even though she's very loyal, she still gets treated unfairly because, as we know, this was a misogynistic era. She unknowingly becomes part of Iago's plot through the famous handkerchief, which we'll do in another video, I think. But when you dropped a handkerchief in this era, it kind of meant that you were attracted to somebody. And Bianca kind of plays an unwitting role in that scheme about Desdemona's handkerchief dropping to the floor, which then drives Othello crazy. Okay then. Right, so if we just do a nice little summary at the end. So we've looked at some of the basics of this kind of tragic play in that sense, and some of the key plot events. We've also looked at some of the key context. That would be really good for you to tease out and research and do some independent research on that. And then we've finished off by just introducing you to some of the main characters of this play. Okay, so obviously it just remains to say, if you've enjoyed this video, please feel free to hit the like and subscribe and the bell icon as well, because that really helps us grow, and it really kind of helps us develop more videos. Okay then, so hopefully that's been useful for you. Thanks for watching, and see you soon.